So hello, my name is Chris Gardner. I'm a general partner over at Underscore VC here in Boston. We're early stage investors. We invest in B2B software companies, typically pre-seed and seed. And what I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about today, I've got kind of a two-part presentation. I thought I'd start by um, talking a little bit about how we as investors think about investing in AI companies. Starting with, of course, all of the hype machine that we all kind of see. Like if you were to believe everything you read, online, you'd think that AI was coming to eat the entire world. Software is eating the world. Is it doomsday or dawn? It's going to kill SaaS of all things. I have a pretty simple answer to that, and and that's nonsense. That said, the what's going on with AI is going to be no less impactful than what we all saw at the dawn of the internet, or the dawn, the release of the iPhone in 2007, or the dawn of cloud. AI, in fact, I think is probably bigger than all of them combined. And it's going to impact software, and certainly software investing similarly. One of the questions I get asked all the time is that, as VCs, we're sometimes guilty of looking at a founder and a startup that's building a company and say, oh, geez, there's already incumbents. Salesforce is already there, or HubSpot's already there. How could you ever compete with them? Isn't all the and is that true with AI? Isn't all the value going to accrue to the incumbents? And I think that's also nonsense. And there's a reason for that. Literally through some of these transformations, over the years, whether it's web, mobile, cloud, and now AI, trillion-dollar software industries were built on the back of these incumbents. In the early days of the web, it was Firefox, now known as Mozilla, and Microsoft and Google Chrome. And mobile, it's Apple and Android. Cloud, you have Amazon, Google Cloud, Azure, and an AI, of course, OpenAI, etc. We will see trillion-dollar industries. We're already seeing it built on the back of these incumbents. And so why is that? It's because all software companies are now AI companies. I mean, literally, we don't see a single startup come through our door that AI isn't front and center. It's generally speaking in the title slide, if not the first slide. And that's simply because AI now and forever will always be part of every software application. It's simply too profound of an innovation for anything but that to be true. And so here's a slide that we use to kind of talk about the different waves of AI and how they fit in, and how we think about investing through these what we call these AI waves. And in AI wave one, we're really thinking about AI as a feature. The very when OpenAI was first released, the first thing you saw was everybody slapping kind of a voice input field onto every application. And really that's AI, artificial intelligence, as user interface. We're going to start talking to computers instead of typing. And very quickly, that evolved into, and it's actually simultaneous. AI is an assistant or a co-pilot, an AI that'll help finish your sentences, help generate code, and all of that stuff. We're right in the middle now of the wave two stuff, where AI is automation, and agentic AI, where AI is automating complex workflows within any industry. And increasingly, especially in the life sciences, we're starting to see AI actually as a thinker, a researcher, a decision maker. And this gets a lot of press, and you can kind of call it what you will, but there are certain jobs for which AI will act like an employee. We're seeing a lot of it, for example, in customer support, where instead of the hopelessly awful IVR voice menus of customer support, you're starting to have AIs that are starting to chat with you, at least semi-intelligently. And then what happens as this evolves? What's the natural outcome of this? Do we foresee a future where there's maybe an entire company, and maybe it's a customer support company that's almost entirely first level support chatbots? Or what about AI as a complete industry? Do you think we really, in the long term, need people to run a stock market, or a parametric insurance company that automatically sends payments if there is a hurricane in your zip code? I think that's all kind of TBD. But when we think about where we're investing, we're kind of right down the middle here, investing in this kind of late wave two, early wave three types of companies. Let me just do a quick check over in the window and make sure you guys are following along here. Okay, excellent. Just making sure I'm not losing you guys. So that was kind of, just an intro on how we think about as investors. But what I'd like to share with you kind of going forward here is what I call MVP in the age of AI, and how AI is dramatically impacting how we build software in this industry. And I'm going to speak to you mostly today as someone who used to be a product manager. I was actually a software nerd myself. I spent 20 plus years, worrying about things like, Jira tickets and roadmaps and kind of all that stuff. But I lived that pain. I like to say I'm a recovering product manager at heart. And so the back half of this presentation will be less as an investor and more kind of from that perspective. And as part of that, I kind of this concept, and yeah, I know it's super oversimplified, but I call this the circle of software life. At the top, you have a customer has some pain or some sort of problem, some combination of technical support or sales or even product managers and sometimes engineers even it's their job to listen to customers and kind of aggregate particular problems to solve. Historically, it's been up to someone in the product organization in a tiny company. Maybe it goes straight to engineering, but someone in the product organization's in charge of distilling what those problems are and defining what the solution is, sharing that with the engineers who are set out to build product to address those problems, which then hands it off to sales, who sells it back to the customer. This is the very, very, very best companies, in the universe. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about, car companies or clothing companies or software companies, but they're exceptional at this circle. They're very, very good at understanding customer pain and customer sentiment, and then rapidly iterating and getting a product into customers' hands. We call this, what we call this at Underscore is pace. We call it pace of execution. And for startups, this is absolutely existential. This process actually takes time. It takes a good bit of time, and sometimes it takes so much time that as a startup, you run out of money before you actually achieve product market fit. So I would argue that pace of execution, and in fact, one of the things we evaluate startups on is, how quickly have they gotten to whatever stage they're at? How long did it take? What did they learn? It's perfectly fine if a startup has pivoted or kind of changed their mind about something, but we want to make sure that they're moving very, very quickly, because that's absolutely critical. And we believe that the emergence of AI tools in particular for the software industry has changed everything, especially as it pertains to pace. So what I thought I'd do is just tell you a little story about my own kind of internal revolution or enlightenment on how all of this is working. I was actually spending a bunch of time talking to all the companies that I've invested in. This is a year or two back as all this AI stuff was emerging. And I was saying, hey, like, how are you using this stuff? Are you using it, are you creating AI features? Are you using it to develop software? And I learned something pretty obvious kind of in hindsight, which is that the companies that were born before the emergence of kind of LLMs and all these incredibly powerful models were perhaps, some of them were perhaps a little bit behind in making the transition, whereas any company that was born after this came in through our door already sprinting towards AI. And so I was, but I was going through and having all these conversations with startups, and I realized I was starting to sound like that, that kind of obnoxious VC guy. Hey man, did you see what, Toby, the founder of Shopify, he said that memo said everyone had to be using AI, blah, blah, blah. I was realized I was starting to sound like that guy, and what I really needed was a little context. I needed to kind of put my money where my mouth was and start to play with some of these tools myself, so I wouldn't just be that jerky VC asking questions if you're doing it. And so what I did was I actually opened a bottle of wine, sat at my kitchen counter. I had, one of the companies that, I talked about, one of the companies that I was working with had mentioned to me a feature that they were trying to build. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to try to build this feature. And what I did was I fired up, I used Lovable in this case. There's a gazillion tools. I'll talk about that later. I fired up Lovable. I pointed it at this company's website. I said, here's my color palette. I want to build a reporting dashboard. And the reporting dashboard has to be multi-tenant. It has to have roles-based access control. Oh, I need some data. Here, I literally pointed Lovable at a PowerPoint and said, see all these charts? I want all these charts to be reflected in here, and you can use these charts and generate 12 months of synthetic test data for me. I did all that, and guys, I spent like 4 or 5 hours on this. It was roughly a 1/2 bottle of wine, and I built a fully functional, full stack application that just 3 or 4 years ago, with me and a team of 3 or 4 engineers, would have taken 3 or 4 months to build, and I did it in 3 or 4 hours. That's not 5x improvement. That's not even 10x. That's like for the purpose again of prototyping, that's roughly 100x or more improvement. Now, is it production ready code? Hell no. But is it good enough to share with engineering as a product manager? And I'm trying to explain what I think the customer needs and how it might look. Absolutely. Would I share it with the friendly customer and have them bang on it and say, hey, what do you think? This is something I'm working on. Give me some feedback. You betcha. And you know what the output of all this is? It's that cycle time I was talking about. This is just this MVP stage. This is like 100x improvement in kind of this early stage of developing products for customers. Really, really important. And if you believe me when I tell you that pace of execution is existential for startups, this is a really, really big deal. But look, there's another side to the story. There's this guy named Jeremiah Brazeau, who's one of the I think best technical minds in the Boston area. He's a distinguished engineer at Shopify, works directly for the CEO. And he said something to me at one of our events. He said, AI coding assistants are like insanely talented, brand new CS graduates that have never had a real job in their entire life. And you should treat them as such. And this really rang true to me, just based on my experience or just based on my experience kind of doing some of this vibe coding stuff. Look, these new AI friends of ours, you need to give them explicit instructions about what you want to create, otherwise known as prompts. They often lack context and the broader objectives of the company. You have to go back and check their work. I think product managers will make excellent prompt engineers, but you need actual engineers to go and check their work and fix their mistakes, because they'll make some. And then because of the limited context window of AIs, sometimes if you're in kind of a long vibe coding session, a couple hours in, they completely forgot what you told them beforehand. And so it's pretty clear this is not it's not a silver bullet, but it is a big deal, from a prototyping perspective. So here's basically what I learned over the course of this exercise, is that my new machine friend here is really, really game changing. But garbage in, garbage out. When I started vibe coding my first application, I was kind of iteratively prompting. So, several sentences, it would generate something. Oh, wait, I need this feature. Several more sentences of prompts. Hey, I need something like that. Over the course of an hour, it quickly got itself tied up in knots. It was buggy and starting to break, all this other stuff. So things got messy pretty quickly. And it got messy pretty quickly. I also learned about, the limited context window. So terrible memory. You have to kind of re-prompt many times on certain things that you don't want the machine to forget. And then the UI, even with these no code tools, I think that professional user interface designers and especially human factors people who really study how people interact with machines, I think their jobs are safe. I think there's a reason for this. The UI was solid but uninspired. Why? Because it's trained on everything we've already done. So it kind of has that generic look and feel. And so what I realized is that PM-ish skill, product manager skills are really needed for prompt engineering. I think PMs will be the best at this. And engineers are best equipped to go turn, a quick and dirty MVP prototype into real code. And I really believe that a skilled designer or human factors person will absolutely crush, one of these out of the box app builders. But where does AI really, really deliver? And it's clear that prototyping and MVP is really where it's going to benefit. It's really where it's going to benefit the most. I talked about what we did on the product side for the prototyping. My little project was easily 100x. It wasn't even 10x, but I think that this tooling, I think, is going to be, particularly useful, especially these no-code tools in the prototyping phase. I just think that, the ability to sit down with a customer, take a bunch of notes or record them with Granola or whatever your AI tool of choice, and then go back and start immediately prototyping, in some cases with or without an engineer, or the engineer can be the one that listens to the customer and does it themselves. But to be able to instantly turn things into prototypes is absolutely game-changing. But AI is affecting everything about a company. Support, you can have certainly first level support, can kind of be done with AI. It's way better than IVR, the endless kind of, endless phone menus and stuff like that. Engineering building, every engineer I know is using, obviously, coding co-pilots or code generation tools now. I mean, Claude in particular is just outstanding. And it's, I don't think of it as a replacement for engineers at all. What I think it is an unbelievable force multiplier in the amount of quality code that any given engineer can create. And I think actual engineers are most qualified to use these tools. Vibe coding is fun and awesome for prototyping, but we need really smart people that understand DevOps, that understand how to architect for performance, et cetera. And then even in sales, AI tools, salespeople are using it for kind of direct outreach. If you have to do anything like kind of direct outreach via email, you can use AI and AI agents to kind of generate tons and tons of emails, do outreach, engage. You can use it to kind of create, bespoke pitch documents and PowerPoints and all of that stuff. So it helps across it helps this notion of pace. It helps across the entire organization in the software business. But really, for the purpose of today's discussion, I'm talking about the MVP stuff, and it's just bonkers how much of a force multiplier it is. And the good news is there's a gazillion choices on the types of platforms you want to use for this. And this is, I hate putting slides up like this, because the second I put them up, there's so much going on in the space. It's instantly out of date. I mean, look at this freaking market map on the right side from Tom Best. It's quite good, but look at all the different platforms you have to choose. I kind of handpicked a bunch on the left, just that I was looking at, and that I know my nerd friends and others are kind of using, and they kind of rank for, super easy to use for kind of non-coders like me, and bolt and lovable Replit, and they get increasingly nerdy as you kind of move down. But there's something for everybody. Most of them have free plans, and I encourage everybody, whether you're on the product side or on the engineering side, to start playing with some of this stuff. But it's not like there's not a ton of choices here for this stuff. Let me just go over and check the chat again, just make sure we're rocking here. Okay, everyone's introducing themselves. That's nice. So let's keep going. So, to bot or not, man versus machine. First of all, there's been issues, and I'll just kind of say this clearly. A little over a year ago, Klarna, right on the heels of all these incredibly competent AIs coming out, they announced that their AI assistant does the work of 700 people after it laid off 700 people. And a little over a year later, they hired everybody back. Why is that? Look, this is, who would have thought customers actually like talking to human beings? And look, this is a pretty public example related mostly to support staff, but finding the right balance between human and machine interaction is absolutely critical. Because people can do things that machines can't. And that is true today and will be true forever. And I just, I threw a bunch of word salad around, my software circle of life here. But it is absolutely critical that we bring our human skills when we're talking about building a company or building software. Support people, for example. Part of the reason why Klarna went back and hired real humans is because when someone's pissed off and your software's not working, or your product's not working, or your car's dead on the side of the road, they want someone on the other side of the phone, a human that actually demonstrates empathy. product managers aren't just going to be robots that take bug reports from customers and algorithmically generates the next set of features. I expect product managers to spend time to also empathize with customers and to imagine solutions to problems. Maybe imagine solutions to problems that some customers sometimes didn't even realize that they had. We rely on seriously and deep technical people to innovate, not just innovate and build stuff that's already in an LLM, because LLMs have now been trained on the code base of the universe, but to innovate in ways that no one has done before, that there was no AI training. And salespeople, guess what? For those of you out there that are at startups, how hard is it to sell as a 5-person company to go sell software to a big company? It's really freaking hard. And the people that are good at it, you have to persuade a big company to take a bet on your little software company. And that's very often the job of personal persuasion and relationship building. And so all these things, emotion, creativity, building a company culture, leadership, morality, taste. I think taste is important. I think beauty is important in products, and insight. All of these are human attributes that, if anything, will become increasingly important as we start to lean more and more on AI for the busy work or the plumbing in building out software. We think that, it underscores investors. We feel so strongly about this that we literally rank founders that come to us to pitch a company. We have something called the 5 A's, and we literally rank the human beings on their human attributes. And this we've been doing this since we were founded in 2015. So this long predates AI, and we think it's even more important. But when we're looking at a founder, we want founders that show self-awareness. They understand their strengths and weaknesses, and they're curious. We want kind of raw ability, entrepreneurial, visionary, and unique domain expertise. We always like founders that have what we call a right to an opinion on a particular domain and space. Maybe they earned that right by talking to 200 prospective customers, or maybe they worked for an HVAC company for 10 years before deciding to build, a software platform for HVAC. Aptitude, fast learning, adaptable, adjust to the unknown, great attitude, team player, energize others. And perhaps one of the most important ones is what we call attractor. Founders need charisma. They need charisma to attract the best talent, to attract customers, be persuasive, and of course to attract investors today and the future. So none of this goes away, and we actually emphasize this even more in the age of AI as we're kind of looking at companies to back. So I've got a few closing thoughts here, and then we can open up the chat and we can kind of try and answer some questions. Look, there's no doubt that AI is a game changer for shortening software cycle times. And for a startup, this is everything. You need to get to product market fit. You need to build software on a limited budget and be able to deliver it before you run out of money. Or you need to get to the point in your growth that you're able to raise more money. And so that cycle time, that pace of execution I talked about, is absolutely critical. Another closing thought. Nobody should be freaking out here. Look, I know some guys my age who are maybe freaking out a little bit because it's yet another kind of technology revolution that you have to kind of jump in with both feet and figure out. The good news for anybody who hasn't really started to dig in on this is that we're still in the first, or to use a baseball analogy, we're still in the first or second inning. Like this, all of this stuff is brand new. But the time is now to kind of jump in. It's not too late to jump in now, but it'll be too late in a year or two if you haven't started to figure out how AI can help you in whatever job you're doing. I mean, we use an enormous amount of AI already in our job. We use it multiple times per day. It's incredible. My job is meeting hundreds of founders a month, learning about an industry often that I don't know particularly well. And one of the things AI is incredible at is to be like, hey, I'm learning about a new industry in pharma, where a certain type of drug is being invented or whatever it is, and to be able to have an AI that can kind of survey the market and give me the basics, just to kind of give me a 2-page brief sheet and all the things I need to know and the types of questions I should be asking, that alone is a game changer. And so don't wait, figure out how to leverage it in your business, in your company, in your day-to-day work, and the rest will take care of itself. It's not too late. It's also, and I talked a little bit about how, will all the value accrue to the incumbents? It will not. In fact, I'm here to tell you today that I think it's actually a huge opportunity for startups to take down some of the big guys. Why do I say that? Because some of these companies that were born, approaching 20 years ago, even if they're the greatest companies in the world, I'm not picking on anyone, but I'm talking, giant companies, whether it's Salesforce or Microsoft or, Shopify or any of these things, some of them will make this leap, and with this leap into this kind of next technological revolution and leverage AI in really, really meaningful ways. And some of them will be the leaders in it. Some of them will not. Some of them won't make the leap or will not be able to move as fast as a startup. And so I think what happens in cycles like this is that all of the incumbents become suddenly vulnerable because they can't move at startup speed. And so this is an incredible opportunity for startups, not just to go and kind of penetrate markets you weren't able to penetrate before, but because these companies, especially the ones that are slow, are going to be looking to acquire companies like yours, because that will accelerate their leap into AI. And then finally, look, I am a AI optimist, but I am not an AI maximalist. I do not think it's the end of human labor. In fact, I think more than ever, getting the most out of AI demands skilled human supervision for all the reasons I kind of laid out before. And I really believe this, that in an age where everybody has access to the same magical technology, it's like every country in the world has stealth fighter technology, like the best Gen 5 stealth fighter. When everybody has that, you end up, as a founder, you end up being the moat. It's all the stuff I talked about here that will differentiate you from your competitors and help you innovate and figure out, what you need to build and what is it about your company that makes you special. And so this isn't the end of kind of human labor. Far from it. I think what I think is going to happen is that the people that have these skills are going to be the best founders in the world. So I'm kind of right on time here. I'm not exactly sure how this works. I'm kind of reading through the chat here just to see if anybody wants to kind of fire in a couple questions or not. Jim just said, bravo, good presentation. Thanks, Jim. Got his MVP version 1 completed. Yes, yeah. I thought you were going to say you completed while we were talking. That would have been even more awesome. Oh, hey, Nikki, nice to see you. James said he built an AI that does collections work for insurance industry. How to find the right VC. Hey, James, on finding the right VC for a niche space like that, it's the best way to do it is you live on their website and you go through all their portfolio companies and find ones that look like you. That's the recommendation I always give to folks. Find ones, and if it's in the insurance industry, anybody that invests in insurance tech would probably take a peek at that. Tomas, use of AI in strategic design and design strategy. I think that's going to be very, very company specific. Look, I think AI, I don't think AI is particularly great at design. Why? It's trained on all the design that exists before that. What I do think it can accelerate is the execution of kind of a human-led design. That doesn't mean you can't let an AI kind of randomly generate stuff. You see this in art a lot, especially marketing art. You let AI generate a bunch of random stuff and then see what happens, and maybe there's some gold in there. In general, though, I think humans are going to be driving that. Excellent. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, see if there's any new stuff here. How do you feel about horizontal? Chris, this is a good question. Chris Messina, how do you feel about horizontal AI SaaS? So we directly invest in horizontal AI SaaS and vertical AI SaaS. Look, I think they're two very different builds. I think there's kind of three kinds of AI builders that I think about. There's the PhD, bulging forehead, super geniuses that are building foundational technology and publishing research papers and need to raise $100 million to build a new kind of foundational model. And I know this is maybe obnoxiously oversimplistic. And then I think about people that are trying to build big, giant horizontal software platforms with AI at its core. Also, expensive to build, not as much as it used to be, often running into the big incumbents I talked about. And then I think that vertical AI, where we spend a lot of time, where founders have a deep domain expertise in a particular vertical industry, and basically, you're saying, for example, I kind of mentioned HVAC, but HVAC and car mechanics, and and restaurants and all this other stuff. All of those software industries are going to get remade. All right, I think we're at time. Thank you for your patience. I hope I came through loud and clear. And I appreciate you all. Jesus Christ, this looks like there's 94 of you. So thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you found it useful. And feel free to reach out if you like. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also Chris @_.bc. Thanks, folks.